All right. So I get to introduce Liz in just a second, but before we do that, it wouldn't be a hub event if I didn't ask you to scan a QR code. Now, if you haven't scanned one yet, if you've already scanned one today, don't rescan this one. But if you're just joining us and you met us here, then please do scan this QR code. This would be for the two students who just met us here. Scan this QR code, check in. For those of you who are new to the hub, the points that are associated with checking in accrue. So you automatically will get a balance. We keep track of that balance. You can redeem those points for snacks and swag. And if you're at the top of the leaderboard at the end of the semester, then you get invited to a lunch at President Rowe's house. So scanning to get these points really matters. All right, everybody scan the QR, you're all checked in. Takes like 15 seconds to actually do it. All right, so I get to introduce my friend Liz. Liz is an alum, so a lot of times we try to use William & Mary alumni in our guest speaker opportunities because we have awesome alumni out in the world. Liz is unique for me because I got to work with Liz for a little bit just next door. It's kind of strange to be back because we worked right there, and this really wasn't here yet. It was like just an idea in I think Will's mind back in those days. Liz went to William & Mary, studied econ, and then went back for more. So she's a double alum and got her MBA. There was a separation of some years between there, but went back to William & Mary to get her MBA. And I think a consistent sort of thread through all of these logos would be that she gets on people's radar. I think like you were a young CFO within CSX, I think is fair to say. She's gone on to do really amazing things that have made an impact for a lot of people in the Richmond area and continues to do that. I got to work with her when we were at New Richmond Ventures, a little venture capital firm started here in Richmond, Virginia. And Liz made this transition from being one of the operators of the firm to being one of the operators of our portfolio companies. And to be able to bridge that gap between someone who's managing a fund and actually managing a business is a unique thing. That's a hard thing to be able to play in both worlds, but she does that really well. And then from that work at that venture firm or at that portfolio company, ended up starting Sandbox, where she is now. And she's going to talk a little bit about Sandbox, I think. But when I asked her to talk, a lot of times Liz will come and talk about raising money. She's a finance expert. I asked her to talk about building great teams. And she's one of the most intentional people that I know I think in general, but in that way, like you build great teams, you care a lot about the teams that you've built. And I hope that we'll learn about that. In addition to anything you want to tell us about finance stuff, we're all nerds in that regard as well. But we want to know like how you're thinking about building teams and how you coach other founders to do the same. So please join me in welcoming Liz Doerr. And a fun fact for my hub team here, Liz has a corgi. And you might have noticed if you've looked at the hub's Instagram lately that there's a corgi that's featured. I don't really know how that happened, but Liz just showed me the most amazing picture of her garage door with her corgi, which is Lady David Bowie. And if there's some way I'm gonna get Brandon, if you approve, to show that picture. Yeah. Okay. Without further ado. Cool. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah. Thanks. So it's really funny that I am here talking about this because, as Graham said, I manage our finance and accounting vertical, so I don't actually ever talk about any of this. And my business partner, Jill, heads up all of our HR and recruiting. And so I was talking to her this week and I was like, yeah, talking about teams. She's like, what? That's my thing. So anyways, but it's been fun to steal some of her stuff and then customize it for my stuff. So with that, this is me. Thank you, Graham, for that very lovely introduction. It makes me sound a lot fancier than I actually am, but I appreciate it. But as he said, I worked upon graduating from William & Mary, I actually worked in politics for a couple of years, went back to school, got my MBA, ended up working in the railroad industry. There's actually a bunch of William & Mary alums that work for both CSX and Norfolk Southern. And so I worked in corporate finance for both organizations, came back up to Richmond to work with Graham. I think we overlapped for like a month at NRV. And then was really excited to be a part of the small VC fund. They had an angel investing portfolio of about $50 million. And then we raised a $33 million fund. And that was really an exciting experience in learning how a fund is set up and how you raise money from people and then how you deploy that money. And then, as Graham said, one of our portfolio companies needed some CFO work. And while I had big Fortune 500 CFO finance experience, I really didn't have it at all at the small company level. And so I stepped in what was supposed to be a couple of hours a week, turned into 30, turned into 40, turned into 50. And before I knew it, it kind of felt like I was really working for the portfolio company and not for the fund, even though I was kind of on loan. And I think obviously there was a company need for additional financial support, but on a personal level, it really excited me. And I realized about myself that I really love working with smart people to help build and grow things. And I'm not a super creative person. I've always been kind of like in my spreadsheet, but I love being able to be around creative people and help them scale and grow using my skill set. And so I decided that that's kind of what I want to do for my life. Second sort of motivator is that when I was at NRV and we were looking at lots of different portfolio companies to invest in, I always felt like there were kind of two financial service providers. There was one that was really good at the bookkeeping and accounting and was at an acceptable price point. They could close your books, make sure that your cash was reconciled, etc. But they really couldn't help on the growth strategy, the pro forma, investor relations, board governance. Or two, it was a really talented human, but they were extremely expensive and they couldn't pay a bill, they couldn't do a journal entry, they couldn't get into a general ledger system. And I felt like for the companies that I like to work with that are growing quickly, maybe growing from 1 to 10 to 20 million in revenue, that there was a role for a service provider that could be both tactical and strategic and do it at a price point that made sense for scaling companies. And so that was kind of the idea for my firm, Sandbox. I teamed up with my business partner, Jill, who has a similar philosophy on the HR and people ops side, and Sandbox was born. Today, we used to actually have offices here in Startup, Virginia, but now we have 20 people, and we're actually hiring 5 more, and we'll probably be at 30 by the end of the year. So unfortunately, we had to leave our friends at Startup Virginia because we were starting to take over the building. But today we've evolved. We call ourselves a boutique management consulting firm, and we have 3 business verticals. I lead our finance and accounting vertical, and we do bookkeeping, accounting, controller, fractional CFO work, and we help companies prepare for a debt transaction, an equity raise, or acquisition, or whatever. My business partner, Jill, has completely taken over our recruiting vertical. And so we do all types of recruiting, tech recruiting, executive recruiting, general staff recruiting. And then a year ago, we were doing HR sort of because that's Jill's background under our recruiting vertical. But what we realized is that the skills of a recruiter and the skills of a HR person are very different. If anyone has worked in recruiting, it's somewhat formulaic. You have to be really good at reading people, of course, so there's some skill transferability, but you run a process over and over and over again, and you innovate that process, but your whole thing, your whole magic is trying to match the right people with the right job. On the HR side, it could be something different every day. It could be, hey, I hired this employee in California. How do I get their payroll tax registered? To, hey, I need an employee handbook. To, hey, how do I build a culture for my team? And so that set of skills and strengths we found was really hard to have under the same vertical. So we moved our HR vertical into its own vertical. And then I realized that my admin, I woke up and I was looking at her hours, and she was spending about 80% of her time on billable work and not spent on doing internal operations, which is what we hired her to do. And the reason for that is because we had a lot of entrepreneurs coming up to us with problems. Hey, one of our clients just raised $40 million, they're now getting over 100 pieces of mail a week. And it's just, you know, some of it is important, some of it isn't, right? Hey, I have no idea what to do with this. I need a mail solution. One, can you stop the bleeding and open my mail and figure out what I'm supposed to do with it? But two, can you automate this, figure out like where mail goes when you're getting 100 pieces of mail a week? Hey, I transitioned from an LLC to a C Corp and the IRS still thinks I'm an LLC. What do I do about it? Hey, I need someone to come sit on my board meeting and take notes and make them nice and normal for investors. Hey, I need this little tweak to this PDF, et cetera, and so on and so forth. And my operations manager happens to be one of those people that can just do anything. She's just a smart person and can just take care of shit for people. And so I kept funneling all of these random requests from our clients over to her, and we realized, oh, hey, there's probably a business need here. So what we ended up doing is in February of this year, we brought on a woman who has been a 5-time chief of staff. Is anyone familiar with what a chief of staff does? Anyone? I feel like it's always interesting because people have different definitions. Anyone want to go first?
Usually I've seen it be kind of the right hand of the CEO. They're on the leadership team. They're doing lots of different stuff, special projects, focusing on important things for the business.
Yeah, perfect. Anyone have a different perspective?
Say project management, strategic.
Yeah, definitely project management is a big one too. Yeah, and so we brought her on to stand up our newest vertical, which we're calling business operations. We debated whether we should call it chief of staff or business operations. We put our HR work under that vertical, and now she is kind of building out our strategy, our project management, our general operations vertical, and that is our fastest growing vertical at Sandbox. And so all of the work that we do is fractional. So essentially, if a company doesn't have a need or the budget to hire a full-time CFO, they can come to Sandbox. We'll give them a certain number of hours of CFO time. Similarly, if a company needs a little bit of project management, a little bit of strategy, they can access us through the chief of staff or through the business operations vertical. And then finally, on the recruiting side, that's pretty self-explanatory. The common thread that unites all of these verticals is that we try to be price accessible to founders, no matter what your stage is, and then we are able to grow with you and expand with you, or contract and maybe find a replacement for us. So a lot of the work that I'm actually doing these days is coming into a company, helping them get their financial systems and operations in order, and then I'll kind of organize myself out of a job, and then we'll go ahead and recruit my replacement or a full-time employee. I'll give an example of how we're price accessible. It's a little bit more easier to explain on the recruiting side, but most recruiting firms charge a % of your placement's first year salary as their fee. So if you place someone for $100,000 in salary, the recruiting firm gets typically 20% or more, $20,000 as the placement. We believe that that misaligns incentives between the recruiting firm and the placement firm, because the recruiter is always going to want to increase the salary of the employee because they get paid more. And that might not always be in the best interest of the company. But two, it's kind of a racket, and there are a lot of ways that you can automate the front end of recruiting so that it doesn't actually take that much time and you focus on the parts that matter. We do not believe in like using AI bots to screen resumes, et cetera, but there are a lot of different things that you can do, even just from like scheduling, screening, interviews, that you can automate. So we do our best to automate in the places that matter, and we charge a fixed fee. And that fixed fee is tiered based on the complexity of the job. So if we're hiring a really technical person, it's going to cost more. If we're doing a national search for a CEO, it's going to cost more. But if we're hiring, we do a lot of like director of finance. Those job descriptions are pretty much all, pretty similar. You tweak them a little bit. We have an existing candidate pool of people that have applied to us in the past, et cetera. So we kind of know what it costs. And so our starting placement fee is $10,000, which is really price accessible. We then also we also have a product that is even less expensive, which is a sourcing solution. So a lot of the recruiting time that people spend is sifting through resumes, figuring out where to post their jobs, getting in touch with candidates and scheduling interviews, screening things, et cetera. So we charge $5,000 for a sourcing solution where we will produce a list of vetted, cleared, screened candidates for an entrepreneur to then take and hire off of that list. So we're always trying to kind of like innovate. How can we create and give access to some of these maybe bigger company products to smaller companies at a price point that makes sense for them. That's Sandbox. That was probably longer than you wanted to hear about Sandbox, but we're hiring, so I figured.
You hired William and Mary students before, right?
So I, for a couple of years taught a class at the business school, financing entrepreneurial ventures, and I hired one student every year that I taught. So, yeah, love William and Mary students. We actually have really, sadly and annoyingly, we have better success at Christopher Newport. So I'm hoping that we can get that balance.
Let's talk.
Okay, pop quiz. What is the strongest predictor of engagement and retention in the workplace?
Manager relationship.
Anyone else? Did I say another hand?
Culture.
Culture. Coworkers.
Values alignment.
Values alignment. Now, I suppose you could probably hand select any statistic that you wanted off the internet to answer this question, but my belief is it's friends. And there's a lot of data to support this, and I think it all kind of applies. And do you have a good manager? Are you creating a good culture? Do you have nice coworkers? But my, TLDR is that it's friends. Employees who report having a best friend at work are 7 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. They're less likely to be actively looking, and there's some research that supports that companies actually do better when employees have stronger social bonds. But it's more about just friends. It creates the culture that you're building. It creates a strong sense of belonging and ownership on in the organization. You have higher productivity, less stress, and culture beats compensation as the top reason why people stay at a firm. You've probably heard that a million times, but I definitely think it is true. All right, you can read all of that. My point here is that I am actually going to share with you, my firm, Sandbox, has been around for going about to be 9 years, and we have not gotten it right always. And so, especially someone that is like a finance and accounting brain, I have definitely made some mistakes. So I thought I would start by sharing my top 10 mistakes and what I learned about those mistakes before I give you some corporate lingo about how you build a good culture. However, culture is built by what leaders recognize, how decisions are communicated, who gets hired, promoted, and retained, how mistakes and conflicts are handled, and through everyday norms and rituals. And so throughout starting Sandbox, I've definitely made a mistake on how I recognize employees, how I've made decisions, how I've hired and fired people, how I've handled conflict, and how I've tried to set up culture. I like to think that we have a pretty good culture today, but it was through years and years of mistakes, learning from those mistakes, and intentionality and right-sizing things. All right. So number 1, my first lesson, diversity strengthens culture. It's not about representation, it's about perspective. My first 2 years, every single person that I hired was a white person with blonde or brown hair from William and Mary. White woman, excuse me, who kind of had the same style as me. And I was having coffee with a friend of mine, a woman of color, and she was like, Liz, what you guys are doing is so dope, but you gotta hire some people of color. And I think DEI is unfortunately a dirty word in some circles today, but we have really leaned into creating the space for us to build a diverse culture very intentionally. And not just like, let's just hire some people that are Black and brown people so that we can, look like we're diverse, but really truly doing the work internally to make sure that we're creating a culture where any human, regardless of race, sex, sexual orientation, gender affiliation, etc., can thrive. And that has strengthened both our organization, it's challenged our thought, it's helped push us to develop our products and how we deliver them, because we have diversity of thought. And in today's multicultural world, if you have a bunch of people that all think and look alike, you are not going to be the best organization. And I can say from the minute that we started thinking intentionally about how we bring more diverse voices into the room, it's been a game changer for our organization. All right, 2, certifications don't equal job fit. Especially on the accounting side, I always get nervous that we're not hiring the right technical talent. And so there was a couple of times that I have made the mistake of looking at someone's CPA on their resume or looking at the fact that they're QuickBooks certified and kind of breezing over their job fit and their technical skills because I was like, oh, well, they have the certification and they have a good degree, it should be fine. And every single time that I did that, the employee did not have the technical skills that I thought that they did. And so I've learned now that I really have to, that it is about the culture ad, but it's also about the technical skills. And it's not about what's on your resume. It's about the work that you've done and how you think. And so if anybody's looking for a job, I know that case interviews are a pain in the neck. And I know that I don't love case interviews because I don't think that being able to think on the spot, how many golf balls can you fit into an airplane really does anything. But I do think that I've learned to test how people's brains think. And so the way that we do sort of our cases is that I will send it well in advance. I'll give you time to digest the case. And it's not like I want a written report, but I usually give folks an example of one of my clients' P&Ls, and I just say, what's going on? Tell me what's going on here. And I'm able to glean pretty quickly. Is someone able to recognize the big trends? Are they able to understand the big risks? Yes, it assesses, do they understand basic sort of P&L structure and accounting? But it's really helped me hone in on making sure that I have at least a baseline of technical skills. 3, clarity and dignity go hand in hand. I have been guilty of keeping people at the organization longer than I should have because I like them as humans. And I've realized through that process that that's not actually doing them any good because I'm not being direct with them about why or why not they are not thriving in the sandbox. And I've made the mistake of, because I haven't been direct, of when I've had to make a difficult decision to move and separate from an employee that they were surprised. And so I'm a big believer now that anyone that is heading towards separation from Sandbox, that they should know that well in advance through lots of conversations so that they understand and I understand exactly where they are in the organization. Obviously, I always want to coach people in and up, but sometimes it doesn't always work out. It just is the nature of any kind of organization. And being clear about performance and giving people the dignity to understand where they are and how they're sitting in the organization before a difficult decision has been made has been really important to me. I will say also, I think we do a pretty good job at offboarding employees now because we are so focused on providing that real-time feedback, providing structured feedback, and making sure that employees know whether or not they, we sort of think that we can get them in and up. We also have a pretty thoughtful offboarding process. So unfortunately, I had to make a difficult decision to separate from an employee last year. They were new in their career and they are good at lots of things. They were just not good at the job at Sandbox. And so Sandbox were consulting. Lots of my employees have 10, 15 client loads. For some people, that's just too much context switching, right? Some people really thrive in like a one job or one sort of reporting structure, et cetera. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. It just means that that's not a good fit of your natural skill set. And so this person struggled with that particular sort of context switching in between clients. So we had to make the difficult decision to separate from that person, but they knew it well in advance. We gave them a 2-month runway and we gave them structured coaching to find their next chapter afterwards. So we didn't just give severance, but they came into the office once a week to meet with me and my business partner so that we can make connections for them and find a job fit that actually made sense for them. So a lot of times sometimes I think early on in my career, I was like, oh, I feel so bad, right? And I felt like it was like a personal thing, but a lot of times it's not because any person is doing a bad job. It just means that they're a bad fit for the skills that you need to hire for. Around sort of like the technical skills, I do think that I've also learned that grit and coachability go a long way. And so I have been guilty of wanting to give up on employees who I didn't feel like had the technical prowess. But I've been pleasantly surprised by their grit and coachability. And so I think that if a human is lacking in sort of the technical skills, but has the desire to be coached and has the desire to the grit to kind of withstand the coaching, they can actually really thrive. My two top performers in Sandbox right now that I will probably promote in the next year were probably my two lowest performers 5 years ago. But the common denominator in both of them is that they were coachable, they were self-aware, they wanted to work hard, they had the grit, and they were able to, with support, kind of rise in, get coach in and coach up. And I think that they are the strongest employees because they had to work really damn hard to get where they are, but they also understand the challenges of the people that they're managing now. Experience matters more than we think. I can be very quick at doing something. So for a while, I'll be like, oh, like this took me 15 minutes, it'll probably take you 30 minutes and get it done to me. And what I've learned is that this is my rule. For every 5 years of experience, double the time that you expect to test. 5 less years of experience, double the time that you think a task to take. So for example, I have 20 years of experience. If someone is coming in with 0 years of experience and it will take me 1 hour, I will tell them that it will take them 4 hours. And that's hard for, I think, someone that has been in the workforce for so long to be like, why does it take you so long? And you take for granted all of the little lessons that you've learned along the way, that just when you're a new employee, you just don't have that context. You don't know that Excel formula. You don't know how to think through a problem because you never thought through it before. And so I hired someone on day one. I was like, yeah, build out this financial reporting package. I gave them 0 training. They stayed up all night to do it. And it was still inaccurate in the morning. And I remember being like, why is this so hard? This takes me an hour. And obviously that was a completely unfair expectation on the employee. But I was transposing my 20 years of experience on someone that had 0 and expecting them to perform with little to no training. And that obviously was not a good look. I used to think that burnout equated to hours worked. And so when my employees would be like, oh, I'm so stressed, I would look at their time cards and be like, no one's working more than 40 hours a week. What's the problem? And I have learned that burnout is not just about the hours that you're putting in, but it's about the stress, it's about the emotional load, etc. And so we are a fast-paced culture. We work with startups that are fast-paced. We work with lots of different companies. Consulting in general is notorious for burnout culture. And I would not say that we've totally solved it, but I think we've acknowledged that it is a challenge and something that we've taken head on, and that I've not equated it to only hours worked. So really working on strategies to reduce stress, reduce burden, increase sort of happiness and well-being in the workplace. My coach told me once, if an employee gives you constructive feedback and you respond badly, you will lose that privilege for the rest of your life with that employee. And I had an employee that had some really hard feedback for me. He sat on it for 1.5 years. And when he finally delivered the feedback, because I've been doing some work on myself to try and be more open to that feedback, I said, why didn't you come to me earlier with this? And he said, well, the last time that my peer gave you feedback, you reacted in XYZ way. The feedback was incredibly important for me. It's something that I didn't understand about the organization, and it was a true gift. Very hard for them to deliver that feedback. But because of my behavior 1.5 years ago with an employee that wasn't even him, he sat on the feedback. And so that was really like a gut punch. But a true lesson for me in how I am receiving feedback, especially as a business owner. That's my baby. I want to think that everything is okay and that I'm building a great thing, but it doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities to change. And because of my inability to hear that without being defensive, it created unnecessary sort of sitting on information that I needed to know. Culture needs both structure and spontaneity. So we've done a lot of work on both creating a strong culture at Sandbox through our words and through how we talk to each other, but also in building in daily moments and rituals. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we do. And despite the fact that I have made a lot of mistakes, I had an employee tell me at a retreat in October that she's like, I can't believe what a different manager you are from 5 years ago. And so I think that leadership truly does start at the top, and how you learn from your missteps and how you show up owning them, and then how you actually put your lessons into action. And so I'm certainly not perfect. Our culture is still very much a work in progress, but I think that I'm pretty authentic, and I think that authenticity has enabled us to grow and learn from our missteps and put them into action in a way that has been good for employees. So the employer generally gets the employee they deserve. And so if you as an employer are not focused on how you're creating a strong environment for your employees, then your employees are obviously not going to be the kind that you might want. All right, so what are the elements of a good culture in the workplace? Friends. Well, transparency.
Honesty and respect.
Honesty, respect.
Integrity.
Integrity.
An equal like value exchange.
An equal value exchange.
Yeah, I mean compensation, I mean benefits, like if someone's gonna work really, really hard for the organization, then the organization needs to be equally committed to like a fair value exchange.
So
and all
equal
of that
playing field,
comes.
that's what it's.
Or that job demand and job resources. So if your demand is high to produce, do you have the resources to produce?
Yep. So I think you probably named a couple that aren't on that slide, but yeah, I mean, it's communication, trust, involved leadership, which we could probably throw in the sort of resource matching, equal playing field, collaboration, access, and support. If you're not conscious about the culture you want to build, the culture will build itself. So these are the things that I'm now going to go through sort of what we at Sandbox have consciously done to build our culture. So first, we have developed a mission and vision statement and a series of core values. One thing that I'm probably most proud of is that our core values are things that we repeat at staff meetings, we repeat in interviews, we talk about colloquially across the organization. And so I'm really, our values are like easy to remember, like you need to be authentic, you need to have a growth mindset, you need to be scrappy, and you need to be curious, right? They're not like a bunch of corporate mumbo jumbo. It's pretty like self-explanatory. One of our slogans is like that we'll say sometimes is like come as you are, which helps us come as you are, we choose you. And then another slogan that we say is fail forward. And I would say that people say come as you are or fail forward like at least once a week in the organization. I had a fail forward moment. Here's how I learned from it. Here's what I'm doing about it. Hey, I'm really ADHD, so I'm gonna like be like standing during this meeting because I can't sit still. Come as you are, right? And so I think by putting pen to paper on what we believe our culture to be and manifesting that with our employees, it has gone a long way. Okay, so 2 is model the behavior you want to see. I believe that sometimes in performance reviews, 2 things can be true. You can want what's best for the organization, and you can want what's best for the employee, and sometimes those 2 things are in conflict. I have a really star performer, and during his performance review last year, I said to him, like, as your boss, I want you to stay, but this is the cap of the salary that I can give to you. And as your mentor and your friend, you should leave the Sandbox because you really need to get company experience working for an actual startup as a finance person. You're not going to have the same wealth building potential that you want by staying at Sandbox. And honestly, you're not going to get the experience that you need to develop in your career. Those 2 things are conflicting. I really want the human to stay. He actually did end up staying for a myriad of other reasons, but I suspect in the next year, he'll be making some changes. And that's hard, but what that conversation did is helped me and him plan on a transition for him offboarding. So, and it allowed me to support him in his job search beyond the Sandbox, which now I know, I know I've got him until probably the summer, but probably not long after that. And so it allows me to find his backfill. It allows me to support him in his career, and hopefully it's built trust between the two of us. It also allowed me to buy a little bit more time, because if I hadn't had that conversation, I suspect he would have left sooner. But I think it built a lot of trust and allowed me to get him for another year and a half while we could transition him out. Transparency builds trust. We have a standing agenda item in all of our staff meetings called sticky situations. And it's basically where anyone can talk about something that happened that was maybe a challenge in the prior week with a client or interpersonally, and talk about what they learned. The first couple of months that we had that as a standing agenda item, the only two people that talked during sticky situations were me and my business partner. And now I would say at least once a week, someone brings something in the room to talk about sort of what they learned from a mistake that happened. And so we're trying to build a culture of, don't keep your mistakes to yourself. It's okay to make a mistake. You can fail forward. How do we learn from it? And make it not punitive, but really make it about growth. Creating rituals that reinforce respect. We have sounds silly, but like, we've got a Slack channel that's SBX shout outs, right? And people shout out from the Slack channel, and we say very intentionally, it is an expectation of you as an employee that you're shouting at least one member of your team at least once a week. It's not hard to do, but it's a way to create just a little nugget of excitement amongst your employees. Every year I buy everyone little trophies with joke superlatives on them. Like one of my employees, his superlative this year was most likely to listen to death metal while doing categorizations and reconciliations, right?
Mhm.
But it's like little things like that that I think you have to be intentional about, and you have to have fun with, and you have to make it sort of your own that matches the culture of your personality. I'm pretty proud of the fact that I think we work really hard to shut down any shit talking in the organization. I had a new employee that was hired a couple weeks ago, and she said to me, she's like, people definitely have their problems with each other, but one of the things that I really appreciate is that no one is sitting there bad-mouthing anyone. And so Jill and I have zero tolerance for that. You can certainly have your frustrations. You can certainly not everyone's going to be your favorite person, but we really try and tamp down on any kind of behavior that undermines that trust amongst employees. All right, I talked about this a little bit, but I really believe in hiring right. You've probably heard the adage, hire slow, fire fast. I have definitely been guilty of hiring people exactly when I need them, which means that they exactly have to start working at full pace on day one. And that is a really bad onboarding experience for an employee. So we have set that way back. So we do a summer cohort of college grads that come in. We don't expect them to do any billable work for their first 4 months in the organization. We take the time to actually train them and get them reps. We are not perfect about this, but we have now a staffing model, which is why I know how many people I'm planning to hire next year, which is not something I've always had, so that we can actually phase it in. We have also learned to be transparent about our values and culture upfront on the interview process. So at Sandbox, we are a little bit like, I think this is a little bit of a toxic phrase, but we are like a little bit like a family, right? And so we are hybrid. So we do come into the office, we do hang out together after work, and we do give each other a lot of feedback. So I give my employees a lot of hard feedback all the time. And so we just are upfront about that in the interview process, because that can be a little bit of an intense culture if that's not your vibe, and that's totally fine, but that's who we are. And we want people that want that as part of the job. And then I talked about onboarding. This is a big organizational priority for us this year. I think we're pretty good about onboarding sort of like right out of college students, but we're not awesome about onboarding people that have a bunch of professional years under their belt. I think we sort of take for granted how quickly they can just assimilate into our culture and do the work. And I've come to really appreciate how a proper onboarding can really set someone up for success and create sort of more retention with the employee. Policies should match what you say. This is a list of some of the policies that we have at Sandbox. So we have a how we work policy, which sets really clear expectations. Had to learn, have to set really clear expectations about when you should be working, when you shouldn't be working, what happens if you want to work from home or work from Belize, which we have a work from anywhere policy. What happens if you are at home? How do you show up to a virtual call? Are you on camera? Are you not? What happens if you have a doctor's appointment? Is it vacation time? Is it not? What are best practices for when you schedule your doctor's appointment? So we've really set clear expectations. We tell our employees that we are a work-life integration culture. Our working hours are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the way that we define that is that you are able to be in front of a computer within 30 minutes. So that means, like for me, I usually leave the office around 4 to go pick up my kids. I'm not like really actively working during that time, but at 4:30, I'm able to log back into a computer and quickly answer a question. Or if someone wants to go to the gym in the middle of the day, they just got to check their email at least once and make sure that there's nothing that's a challenge. So we've just laid it out really clearly. That's our expectation. And I think that it's helped reduce sort of anxiety and stress amongst our employees. Compensation policy. We have a very clear compensation policy that spells out, hey, if you think that you're underpaid, here are the ways that you come to us with your advocacy for a pay raise. Before we had this policy, employees would come to us ad hoc, or they would come to their managers ad hoc, and it wasn't structured, and it created a lot of, and we weren't able to actually act on the request because it wasn't in the plan. So now we say, you can always come to us to request a compensation review, but we only do compensation adjustments at the end of the year. So most of our employees just come to their end of the year reviews prepared to talk about their advocacy around their compensation if they feel like they need it. And that's cut down on a lot of the noise. We have a feedback agreement. This outlines how we deliver feedback to our employees so that they can understand that they are going to be getting feedback, and they're going to be getting a lot of feedback, and that it's not scary. It's because we want to develop them. But if you're at a place where people don't give a lot of feedback, that can be a little bit intimidating. So, for example, one of the pieces in our feedback agreement is that if we're going to give hard feedback to an employee, we never do it in public. Second thing that we do is if we're going to give hard feedback to an employee, we give them a heads up. We say, hey, I'm going to schedule 30 minutes with you. Trigger warning or heads up, it's going to be some tough feedback. It's going to be fine, but I want to give you a heads up on it. We talk about sort of what are the action steps after the feedback and so on and so forth. We have a DEI statement. This reaffirms our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. It's super central to how we operate as an organization. We have a leveling framework that clarifies bands, pay titles, pathways so employees can know how they can advance in the organization. And then because we're a consulting firm and we do a lot of billable work, a lot of it is around hours. And so we have a whole process so employees can understand hours. Employee perks are optional, but not. On the left, you can see my one employee, Anne, who is using her wellness stipend for bar class. On the right, I think we do really good swag. We don't do like logos on our swag. We just do blue and yellow cool items. So the scarf was our swag from this year, and the New Balance shoes were our swag from last year. But it's just like kind of a fun thing. It's like a thing that employees look forward to every year. I think it's like pretty nice stuff. We launched a sabbatical perk. So based on your tenure at the organization, you can take a month off. And so we had our first sabbatical this year. One of our managers went, read her little thing. She just got back from a month-long sabbatical, which we were really excited to introduce that. That benefit for a firm of 20 people, we offer one of the higher ends of 401k match. We offer a 5% match, which is out of market for a company our size. We pair that match with free or company-sponsored consultation with an external financial advisor so that employees can understand why this is such a big deal to them and how they might think about saving for retirement now. We have a wellness stipend. We used to have unlimited vacation, but you probably read a lot of literature about how unlimited vacation actually results in you taking less vacation. So now we have 6 weeks of vacation, which I think is pretty generous. We have a fun committee that plans fun things to do throughout the year. Volunteering is very integral to our culture. We support a lot of nonprofit clients, so we do structured volunteer events. And then we're always looking to evolve our benefits. We are a small company, so we had the basic health insurance for a little bit. Now this year we started to offer dependent care. We offered an FSA. We're looking into making sure that our this year our priority is making sure that our health insurance policy is includes some additional layers through a DEIA lens. So gender affirming care, potentially support for IVF and other benefits. So it's a work in progress. It's not where we want it to be in the future, but we try and make a little bit of an incremental change every year. So this is us. We actually did not tell people to wear white, blue, and black, but everyone did. So I don't know, maybe we're a cult. But that's kind of what I got. You have to be intentional about culture, and you have to learn from your missteps and then apply them to the future.
I think you get some time for Q&A, right?
Yeah.
You can stick around for maybe like 10
Yeah.
or so minutes.
Yeah.
When in your, you had the 4 core values, when did you say implement or come up or implement them in the last decade you've been in business? And then what do you do on like a day-to-day that you mentioned the sticky situation? Like how do you integrate values conversations into like daily or weekly activities, that kind of thing?
We probably set our values 2 years in. And then definitely around sticky situations, that would be around like our growth, fail forward value. Sort of come as you are. I think we talk a lot about in the interview process about like how we don't want everyone to be the same human. We definitely value and believe that diversity enriches our culture. Scrappy, I think we talk a lot about like, hey, this is a project, like the client doesn't need A+ work, they need it tomorrow. So you need to do B- work, and that's okay. Like that's part of our scrappy value. You have to be a little bit nimble based on the company. And then curious, like maybe a little intense, but like if I see an employee showing up to a meeting with a client in which it's clear that they are not paying attention or they're totally zoned out, I'll say like, hey, I don't think you're being super curious. Like participate in this conversation. I talk a lot about, like, I bring a lot of employees to meetings that may or may not be relevant to them. And a lot of what I say is like, if I'm inviting you to a meeting, it's because I want you to be there to learn and be present and actually absorb the information as part of your training. So like, you shouldn't ever show up to a meeting and not be listening and not be present and be multitasking, because that's part of your job as well.
Can you talk a little bit about your the development of your benefits package? I often have that conversation with small businesses about being creative.
Yeah.
In their benefit offering or their perk offering. So can you talk about how you kind of came to a wellness stipend and a sabbatical?
Yeah. So one thing so I would say both the wellness stipend and the sabbatical are low cost benefits that we can offer, but high, I think, value to the employee. Certainly sabbatical, it doesn't actually cost us anything to offer a sabbatical. I mean, it requires sort of prep work to offload the work, and there's certainly a potential cost on the employee for absorbing that work for a period of time, but we do that all the time with parental leave. And so our perspective was like, we should always be an organization that can prepare to have a human leave for a month and still survive. Like we shouldn't have a single point of failure. And then the wellness stipend really wasn't that big of a cost, but also kind of like a fun thing. We do like a benefit survey every year just to kind of do a pulse check on what's important to employees, and that's where we learned. Like me as a finance person, I was like, I'm so proud of our 401k, but like nobody really understood what it was. So that's when we added it, and I was like, this is huge. Like this is a big deal to you guys. And like our young staff were like, I don't care. I'd rather just have a 4% or 5% bonus. And then we like paired that with an investment advisor, and now she comes and she does like a little math, and she shows how like if you're 22 and you start participating in a 5% match, how much better off you're going to be at retirement. And I think that has helped close the gap there. Dependent care wasn't like a super important thing for our employees. because we have a lot of young staff, and now it's becoming a lot more important. So that's why we introduced it here.
So I have an observation, a question. So the observation is the first two slides where you were talking about culture, energy, and your learnings. That's cool, first of all, and I think it comes from a place of authenticity, kind of what you picked up. I would say like that's a horizontal space for you to play in, where you talk about your HR, and like if I had a company, I would want to know that at the table. So that's an observation.
Thank you.
And the question is, like, you seem to me as very reflective, conscious, and aware that you don't have all the answers. My question is, as you think about the future of where that could be, how are you thinking about the skills and the ideas and the things that you don't have yet, and how are you acquiring that? Like, what does the future need of you? How are you thinking about that now? Like, how are you going about that?
Good question. I think one thing that has been really scary for Jill and I is that we've realized, and we've built kind of a strategic plan for the next 5 years. And we've realized one of the big pieces of that is that we have to stop doing client work. And we have to start being business owners of the consulting firm full time. And what's scary about that is that, like, I know how to do the client work, and I actually don't know how to run a management consulting firm. And so it feels like I'm kind of like starting at ground zero again in my professional career. It's exciting, but it's definitely sort of a mental shift. What I'm doing to combat that is I have a coach, business coach, and a leadership coach. And then we brought on the woman that is the 5-time chief of staff that also has experience in kind of working with executives. So she's standing up for a vertical, but she also is a mentor to me and Jill. And then I would say probably in the next year, our goal is to bring on another executive that has experience growing and exiting a firm like ours to help us learn more.
Is there a reason in the recruiting vertical, because that's what I've done for 10 years, so that's why I'm kind of curious, that you don't do fractional or like hourly and you're pricing it per position versus, sounds like your other verticals are more billable hours, right? But that one isn't.
Actually, good question. We do track billable hours to make sure that we are staying within the retainer that we quote for the client. I actually don't love billable hours, one, because we're bad at it, and two, because I don't like anything that misaligns incentives between the client and the firm. And I think, like, I notice it when I've done CFO work, I'm always hesitant to call an attorney. So I'm like, this is gonna be $1,000 phone call. And you actually need the advice. And so we actually try and price everything really transparently up front. And then so the same thing with recruiting. I just think it misaligns incentives because you're not incented to get the job done quicker because you're getting paid hourly. For some engagements, we will charge hourly, especially if we can't like get a handle on the price. And then I would say like an important sort of value of mine is like, as a professional CFO for a number of years, I hate getting surprise bills. It's like such an irritation for me. So I believe pretty strongly when we're talking to our clients that like I never give a surprise bill. I always give a heads up well in advance. You know, we had, it's a challenge, right? So like some of my employees will be like, I'm working 100 hours on this account. And I was like, well, they're only paying us 50 hours. And the time to have that conversation about you working 100 hours was a month ago when you realized that you were going to be working 100 hours. Because now, because I've set that strong value, I will not go back and charge the client because I hadn't given the client.
Thank you for coming and sharing wisdom and advice. My question is, if you could go back 9 years, opening the proverbial or physical doors of your firm, what advice would you tell yourself?
All the things that I put in this presentation. I think making time in particular, I would say making time for my business partner has been like, it's a marriage at this point. And so like our coaching is like marriage counseling. And I think that we put in the time, but there was definitely a period of time for the first couple of years where we weren't putting in the time. We were kind of operating in silos. And I don't think it was until we actually became very intentional about our relationship that the business was able to actually. So I think like treating your partner like they're your spouse. And we do a lot of founder breakups at Sandbox.
Thank you.
Pretty cool, yeah.
Kind of a follow-up to that, what is your exit plan and then potential like alignment or misalignment with Jill? Because it sounds like you guys are the two.
So I'm never working on another business with anyone other than Jill. So if we do exit Sandbox, which I think eventually we won't be equipped and or want to do Sandbox forever. We actually want like our kind of our next chapters, like we want to buy like a dirty job business, like a plumbing business or an HVAC business or something like that. Like those are some of my favorite clients, and it's often the clients that I feel like I can add the quickest amount of value to. Because there's just a lot of a lot of those companies are printing money, but they're run kind of terribly. And so I feel like our skill set could really enhance that. And I think it would be interesting and fun. Regarding the exit plan for Sandbox, I don't know. I mean, I think one pathway, one of a competitor or another consulting firm exited this year in Richmond, and the founders were really gracious to sit down with Jill and I and tell us their story on kind of what they did and how they did it. So I have an idea of what we can and should look like based on what they told us. And that is in my 5-year plan because I want the optionality. A big part of me would love to like grow and develop talent and let them run it. But I don't know.
I just doubled down on what you just said. Founders who exited came to you, requested, and tried to help you in your own journey. I think that really is indicative of the culture of the founders that are proud to as broader ecosystems.
Yeah.
Founders help founders. And that needs to be a part of the conversation.
Totally. Yeah. So it was definitely a gift.
Well, I know you have to get back to work.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking some time off today to come chat with us and share about this. And I really appreciate the transparency that you shared. That was such a unique presentation to share like 10 big mistakes that you've made. So kudos for going that direction. I appreciate that. So let's do one last round of applause for Liz. I'm sure she has to get out the door in like 5 minutes. So if you want to quickly say hello to her and exchange contact information, do that. And then after that, we need to eat a whole bunch of pizza that got delivered. So eat pizza. The 2 rules are you got to eat a lot of it because you can't. It's good to take something home. But the second rule is meet someone new that you don't know that's here. We have a few alumni who are here, I think. Raise your hand if you're an alum. Couple alumni. Definitely make sure you meet those alumni. Try to meet other students who came to us. Just meet someone that you don't know. Those are my 2 rules. Eat lots of pizza, meet some people, especially alumni. Thank you so much, Liz, and enjoy the rest of the day here.
Yeah, and I do have to. Oh yeah, you have my LinkedIn, and then I think I left my email address, which is just my name at the SBX Tech.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.